Good evening and welcome to the Mandel School's Advocating for Equity Spotlight Speaker Series. I'm your host this evening, Dr. Sherry Warren, along with my colleague, Dr. Scott Wilkes. And tonight I'm pleased to welcome a former colleague from when I was back in Iowa who does state work in Iowa and national and international work that I will let her tell you all about. But please join me in welcoming Mira Yusef.
Hello, everyone.
Mira, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I know your schedule is incredibly busy with all the many responsibilities that you are tasked with. I'm just so grateful that you have joined us this evening. And that you are with an organization called Monsoon that recently had a name change. And then you're also on a national training task force, I think I would call it, but I'll let you call it. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about the work you do?
My name is Mira Yusef. I'm the Executive Director of Monsoon Asians and Pacific Islanders in Solidarity, and our former name is Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa. I'll discuss why we changed the name later. Part of the work too is NAPISEV, the National Organization of Asians and Pacific Islanders Ending Sexual Violence, NAPISEV, which is the national kind of like arm of Monsoon. So it's a program under Monsoon, and we do provide training and technical assistance specifically on sexual violence, improving services to victims and survivors of sexual violence survivors. And we are funded under the Office on Violence Against Women and also HHS. We are the National Resource Center on Sexual Violence and the API communities under the Office on Family Violence Prevention and Services.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's
Those
a lot of stuff.
that's heavy words and a lot of organizations with full names. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about how you came to do this work?
I think my identity has something to do, had influence deeply of why I'm doing this work. I'm an immigrant coming from the Philippines. I came to this country when I left the Philippines when I was about 12 or 13, but then didn't really come to the United States when I was about 13 or 14. I lived in United Kingdom for 1 year and then came to Iowa because my mom married someone who's from Iowa. So me being an immigrant had influenced why I'm doing this work, coming from the Philippines. And then on top of that, I lived in the Philippines. I'm Kapampangan. I'm from the province of Pampanga. So I speak another language besides Tagalog, which is the national language of the Philippines. So I'm Kapampangan. But I grew up in Olongapo City, which is the location of the US Naval Base in the Philippines. So it also has that history of like colonization, right? The relationship of United States and the Philippines and United States being like basically United States after the Spanish American War then had acquired the Philippines, same as Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Guam, and the Marianas Island. And basically, United States acquired that. And because of the relationship with the United States, we had the U.S. military base in Olongapo City. And I grew up like basically seeing sex trade, right? Seeing how Filipino women and girls are then prostituted or basically did not have a choice to be part of the sex trade or to do even sex work. And through that, I like became feminist without saying I'm a feminist, right? Because I've seen it and I didn't really have the language to explain what I was seeing until I came to the United States, where I saw like maybe I even named racism not until I came here, but I saw how racism played even in the red light district in Olongapo City, where this was like in the 70s, where I'm like 55. So I grew up during the Marcos regime. And the US military in Olongapo City also had the segregation between like Black um, Navy and white Navy folks, right? So it's like separated in itself. So like for us, like why is it separated? I didn't really understand it until I came to the United States and then learn about really the history of United States. So I'm doing this work. It's because like where I came from, coming from the Philippines, which is a former colony, still a colony of United States, and then coming to this country, this land that I'm also like not really from here. So I have that both connection, and I have seen like how being an immigrant, being a Filipina, and I'm also Muslim, so therefore that's like all connected in why I'm doing this work. I just maybe this is the path that was just right in front of me, and I just followed it. Right. So yeah, that influence, like my whole being was just influenced by this work.
Well, I'm glad that you were influenced by it and that you're doing it because it's so incredibly important. Now, when I first met you, I know I was confused because I was like, how did this woman seriously do all these things? This is incredible. But you have kind of a non-traditional pathway to leading an organization and to your social work or through your social work education. Can you share with us a little bit about like you had a Fulbright in there and did some international education, I believe. What was all that about?
Okay, so oh my God. So it's this is becoming like my personal story is basically just connected to even like the creation or the establishment of Monsoon, because it's really related to like who I am, even the path that I basically that I have, like walked upon or whatever. So I'm a non-traditional student. I came to Iowa as a high school student. Then I moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area in like 1987 right after high school. And then because we have more relatives there than in Iowa. So then I basically like my political kind of growth was from the San Francisco Bay Area, where I think there's more Filipinos, there was more people of color, women of color that basically had influenced the way I thought, right? Also, that is where like my politics just basically like burst in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then I think and then I got married, have my child. I think that then became my impetus to like, hey, you know what? I need to finish my bachelor's degree. So I came back to Iowa just to do that. But I just like kept on going. Like right after I did my bachelor's degree at Drake, I finished that as a single mom then. Then I continued, I applied for a Fulbright, doing some, I'm interested on because around that time in early 2000 there were like no, this is like mid 1990s, where there were situations where a lot of Filipinas, young Filipina women are leaving the Philippines to work, like let's say Middle East, as domestic workers. And there has been a lot of abuses, physical abuses, sexual abuses of domestic workers who are Filipinas, mostly Muslim. So there was this one situation where there was this young woman, a teenager really, she was like 14 or 15, Sara Balabagan, who was then, I think she was raped by her employer and then killed her employer. And there was this big, it was in UAE, I think it was in UAE. So I remember like going to a Muslim scholar and asked him, I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And he just said, well, she shouldn't have been there, right? She should have been there. So for me, I think there's also this class issue. So for me, my analysis then becomes like, you know what? It doesn't matter what religion you follow or if you're a woman, but the class, being a domestic worker is like basically lower, in social status. Therefore, they don't have that protection. That made me interested of then doing some work or applying for a Fulbright fellowship to do some interviews of Filipino Muslims who had worked in the Middle East or about to leave the Philippines to work in the Middle East. So I did that right after like I got my bachelor's degree in history. I didn't do social work, I did history. And then so I did that Fulbright where I interviewed Muslim girls, women in Mindanao. So I was in Mindanao and also like part of Manila. That's where there's Muslim population. So that's what I did. I did interviewed, I did some oral history project and specifically on that one. Then I came back and then went to grad school at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and got my bachelor's, my master's in social work. And also I went there specifically for a master's in Southeast Asian studies. But then I'm like, what am I going to do with that, right? So then it happened that it's in the same building as the School of Social Work. So I applied for social work. So then I got a dual degree of like getting a master's in Southeast Asian studies and social work. So for me, I think that was a great combination of having both, because it made me think about, because for me, a good like social worker is someone who is curious like about the communities that they will be working with. But then during the time that I was in Michigan, I also received a fellowship, a Boren fellowship, where I did learn Indonesian and Malaysian at University of Michigan, then went to Kuala Lumpur to learn Malaysian, and then I did some work. I interviewed communities in the islands of Sabah, where Sabah is a big island that is owned by Malaysia. And then there's a bunch of islands, the Sulu, Tawi-Tawi area that is the Philippines. But there, it reminds me of, there's a lot of like, border crossing, because historically that border wasn't there, right? So there's a lot of Filipinos that were in Sabah that were like undocumented. So therefore, I went there to kind of like to really again interview Filipinas who are going to Sabah as like who are basically sex trafficked. So that's what I did. So that is also part of the work that I've done during grad school. But for me, I think having that, having this Southeast Asian studies, like really concentrating on the Southeast Asian folks, but specifically internationally, and then the social work part had really helped me, because I just want to go back to like, I started Monsoon right after my bachelor's degree and right before me leaving for Fulbright. I'm in Iowa, coming from the Bay Area, right? So there it was, I was so bored. I got nothing else to do except create organizations. So I am basically one of the founders of Monsoon. This is in 2003 because of my being bored. In addition to that, it was through AmeriCorps. So I'm really deeply saddened that AmeriCorps is being terminated, when in reality, the AmeriCorps program had assisted a lot of communities, because it's through that basically that I've started Monsoon, right? So Monsoon was then started with the help of the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault. So they have help, like, hey, I went to the director and said, can I start organizing in my community, the Asian community? And she's like, yeah, because Iowa is like what, 90% white, and then maybe the API community is like 0.7. I mean, we're basically 0.1 maybe now. So it's a very small community, but there's a need for victims and survivors to get assisted. So for me, I think that is so connected with, like, am I answering your question? Because I'm all over the place.
You're telling a wonderful
Okay.
story.
Okay. So then that's how kind of like it's connected, like how having also like another organization that could be your ally if you're seeing a need in a certain community, especially like communities that we're are kind of connected with, right? So me being an Asian person, because in here in the United States, I'm, the category that we are in is like either Asian Pacific Islanders or Asians, and then me being Filipino American, right? So for us, then from there, I just kind of like Monsoon was started through that, like when in 2003. And then after, I didn't really know what I was doing when we started Monsoon, but I know how to do community outreach. I know how to organize communities. So all I did then is had kind of hosted different community events, like during the year that I was in Iowa. So I did community events just to get folks to know like what we were doing. But then there were volunteers that continued the work when I left, when I left Iowa. So they continued it. And then in 2007, that is when the organization applied for a 501(c)(3), and then also applied for funding that then it became now. So then I'm also the first executive director. So I'm a founding executive director, and I continue. So now in 2007, 2008, it was just me, myself, and I. We had the funding from the state that's about maybe 60,000. So that includes like just my salary and maybe like our rent, whatever. And then we grew from that, like because I like grant writing, because having a social, like getting a master's in social work, I think had really helped me know what I'm doing. I know about community assessment. I know the strategies or, like um certain strategies that we can use for community assessment. So I did photo voice here in Iowa. I did a lot of community listening sessions, focus group discussions. Now I know what I'm doing. And also because of like, I applied for different fellowships. Now I kind of know how to write grants, right? So then from there, we wrote a big grant specifically to fund our culturally specific programming for victims and survivors to Office on Violence Against Women. There's two funding, and we received both. And from that funding, I think then we grew from just it's no longer myself, but now we're growing staff wise. So that for me, that really helped when I decided to do social work, because it really helped me of like, like just finding like different methodologies, and also like what is the foundation of the practice. Like for me, practice should have a foundation or a theory behind it in order for you to be more intentional. So yeah. So yeah, I just went on and on.
Well, and I could listen for hours. It's
Oh
just
no, don't do that. You
fascinating.
gotta ask a question. I'm like, no, it's not. It shouldn't be about me.
This is just such a remarkable opportunity to hear from someone who took some different pathways, who stepped off the traditional path and looked for different kinds of opportunities to continue building the life you wanted, doing the work you are called to.
Yeah, but it's, you know what? Now I'm like looking back, I'm like, yeah, it took me a while, time, right? But then I have now a child, right, she's 24. She's also kind of doing the same thing. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, you're wasting time. But then at the same time, I think I understand where she's coming from. But in my head, just in my head, I'm like, okay, take your time. But
I
yeah.
don't know if the Iowa Chamber of Commerce would be so thrilled that you were bored and had to start a nonprofit to entertain yourself and keep yourself busy, but um, sometimes living in the Midwest and in the Plain States, there's a lot more opportunities available.
I agree. I totally agree. And also there is just a need for it, because I remember when the work, when I came back, then now the executive director, what I've noticed is young folks, I started really working with the youth. So I did a community assessment. And then we invited like elders, we invited just community members, women, we separated women and men, and then young ones. I really started with the young ones. I think they were just open to hear. They were open to see someone that looks like them,
Hmm.
that like doing something that's different instead of working for an insurance company. And then there were also a point where this was 2007, 2008. Like I will bring them to a cafe, but they've never been to a cafe, because I'm so used of a cafe, because that's where I read, that's where I wrote, like when you're in grad school, like being in Ann Arbor, like cafes are the places where I studied, I wrote, I whatever, right? So I want them to understand that there are spaces that they should be at and
Hmm.
feel comfortable. And I remember those times I will just take them like, oh, let's just hang out here and talk, right? And have coffee. And they were like, we never go do this. I'm like, well, now you can. So there are, I think, so that was back in the day. That's been a long time ago. But for me now it's like there's a coffee culture, right? There's a cafe culture, and folks now will do that. But I think there are certain communities that sometimes, like you just have to give them those opportunities, or those like say that it's okay for you to be in this space. It's okay for you to take space, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I am so appreciative of that. Now, I kind of know what Monsoon does, and I know that it does more than I thought it did. So could you
Yeah.
share with us, what does an average week look like, or what kind of services are you providing to people? And this is all across Iowa, right?
Yes, so we are a culturally specific organization that works with victims and survivors of gender-based violence. That means it's domestic assault, sexual violence, sex trafficking, dating violence, stalking, and but just specifically on the Asians and Pacific Islanders, and it's just Iowa. Our main office is here in Des Moines, and then we have an office in Iowa City, and then an office in Dubuque, Iowa, that's specifically staffed by 2 Pacific Islanders. And then because the majority of Pacific Islanders in Iowa live in Northeast Iowa, that area. So what do we do? So we have direct services. When we say direct services, it's really advocating for a victim or survivor, basically walking with them in order for them to get safety and healing, because they've been traumatized. If they've been in a domestic violence situation, then that, whatever that they need for healing and safety, that's what we help them with. So that's the direct services. So we have maybe about 6, 8 staff who are doing that, specifically the direct services. But in addition to the direct services, it is also important to prevent, right? So we have a prevention uh, program that's specifically working with youth. So we have a youth program, but then recently we got funded under the Office on Violence Against Women, Children, and Youth, where we have now it's not just prevention work, but it's also intervention. That means working with young, children and youth. So we have 2 staff who are young ones who are doing that work, right? So we have that. And then in addition to that, we are also receiving money or funding from the Office on Violence Against Women on transitional housing. So transitional housing is where we assist victims and survivors who need housing, permanent housing. It's transitional, but it's really permanent, because what we do is it's also funded under Office on Violence Against Women, where we pay for their rent either 6 months to 2 years. For immigrant survivors specifically, it takes them a while to heal from trauma, to find jobs, and then if English is an issue, therefore it takes them longer. So right now, the money that we're receiving for that is not that much. So we can only basically provide services or housing for 6 folks. That is our max. What I love about this funding is different. It's not like about quantity, but it's more like the quality of services that you will provide to victims and survivors. So our max is 6. So right now we have 5 who we are assisting. So that's one. So we provide that part. And then we also have the office, like funded again by Office on Violence Against Women, the legal advocacy for victims. It is we're hiring for an attorney, because the majority of time, victims and survivors need legal help. They need to be represented for civil cases where, if they want to get a divorce, they have issues about child support, they have issues about, just like on the issue of marriages, right? And then in addition to that, there's also this immigration component. So that is what Monsoon does, like specifically what we do. But now we also had started a community health program where a lot of times when we're thinking about community outreach, especially when we're reaching out to our community specifically on gender-based violence, they're kind of like, I don't want to talk about that. There's a stigma of being a domestic violence victim, or even sexual assault, especially being a sexual assault victim. So therefore, our way of then creating a space for survivors to disclose, they don't have to disclose, is our basically our community health program. So we have two staff who are running that, and what we did a community assessment, and University of Iowa School of Public Health had helped us with that, with our community assessment specifically, that one of the findings is creating that health, and also it's during COVID, right? So we basically then had this, like, let's just create a like a community health program. And through that, the majority of the folks that took part from the community assessment basically stated, what, elders. So now we have an elders program because a lot of the elders are like feeling isolated. So therefore, like, how then do we have, how do we invite them and be in community with each other? And then another one is a moms group, where we have the elders group and then the moms group, where also, like Asian moms, API moms also need that support. So for us, healing is not like an individual act, but it's a community act. So it takes the community for us to heal. Community for us is the space to heal. It's the solution. So it shouldn't be an individual like healing. So our concept of healing is beyond the individual, but it includes the community. So that's what we do overall. So we have all of those components, but we started just really on direct services or that advocacy. Then we just kind of like created more programmings because now we're this holistic. But in addition to that, we also have a national program, which is NAPISEV. So NAPISEV is training and technical assistance, specifically under the Office of Violence Against Women. And then 2 years ago, we received funding from HHS to be the resource center. So that's one. We provide training and technical assistance. We go out there to like provide training or workshops or one-on-one technical assistance to their, to EDs or programming specifically on sexual violence and sexual assault. So it's national and also in the US territories in the Pacific. So we work in Guam a lot, American Samoa, and then Hawaii, Alaska, right? But since we are immigrant, we received funding back in the day under the Novo Foundation to do some international work. So NAPISAV also then we have sister program in Indonesia and also the Philippines. In the Philippines, through the Novo Foundation funding, we co-created an organization called Alaya Center, which is in Angeles City. Angeles City is where the US Air Force Base was, also red light district. So we work with, again, women who were in the sex trade or about to leave the sex trade or want to get out of the sex trade. So we basically have a house there that we rent, and then they just recently rented the second house for like economic development. So it's not, and then we don't, when we do international work, is we don't go there thinking that we know everything, right? We go there and listen. It's like, here, this is how we can help. And how we can help is really finding the money for them to continue the work, right? So they know the solution. We have the resources as like people who are living, folks who are living in the United States. We have those resources. So the money then goes to them more than in the United States. But then Novo Foundation ended, and then now there is another funding under a life story that's basically funding our work in the Philippines. And then in Indonesia, it's more the creating, so Nina Yusef, who's my colleague who's running NAPISAV, basically is working with they're more like Islamic scholars, or like feminist Islamic scholars, who's doing more work on that one. And then mine is different because mine is coming from this perspective of the, sex tourism, sex trade. So that's why like our interest is based on, what we know or what we have kind of, like what our passion is about. So that is what Monsoon Napisef does. We're all over the place. Yeah.
Well, Mira, given that a lot of your funding comes from the federal government
Oh,
through HHS and VAWA, are you concerned
very
about?
concerned. Very
Okay.
concerned. Because I think when folks hear culturally specific, they think about DEI, right? Because we're working with a particular community, but we're not DEI. It's about victims. We're not hiring. We're basically like, you know, um, what is the word? We are providing services to a specific community because that is like what is our expertise. So I'm concerned because like for example, last week there were some organizations there were some organizations nationally that their funding got terminated under the Office of Victims of Crime and OJP. So this is under DOJ, but OVW, I have not heard of any organizations yet that got terminated. Maybe the only one that I know that got terminated is ABA, the American Bar Association, because they are training and technical assistance to OVW funded organizations specifically on legal stuff, legal matters. So I'm deeply concerned because we are not even sure if our funding will continue because the requests for proposals or NOFOs are not out yet. Um, so yeah, so we are concerned, but you know what? But we need to continue the work. And yeah, it is kind of like a very uncertain moment. We don't really know what's gonna happen. And it's interesting because we are assisting individuals or folks who are in crisis, right? And then ourselves, our organizations are also in crisis because we don't really know what's going to happen. So yeah. So now the work is also then policy, right? Talking to our representatives, senators, because anything that happened, like policy wise, it affect all of us.
Mhm.
So this work has been really tiring lately. We don't know what's going to happen, but we continue. We continue the work. Yeah, yeah. It's deeply. It's all in our head. Like, who are we? Are we going to lose funding? Who are we going to get? I mean, what's going to happen? For example, tonight, like, if I receive an email saying like your funding has been terminated. So what's going to happen to folks that we are assisting, right? So that's also concerning for us.
Absolutely. Oh, Mira, for our viewers, when we met, I was living in Northeast Iowa, where there is a sizable Marshallese and Pacific Islander population. And I was kind of on the fringe of working with that community there, which was
Mhm.
absolutely fascinating to me. You brought up policy, and I know one of the issues was that they are COFA migrants or the Compactive Free Association. Uh, and they used to be able to access Medicaid, but then when welfare reform happened in 96, that was pulled. And I think I
It came
heard,
back.
that's what I thought.
Yeah. It's because of the advocacy work of like national folks, right? For example, the Asian Pacific Islander, oh my God, there's the forum, like API Health Forum. They basically advocated for the COFA folks. So when we say COFA, it's basically Micronesia, Marshall Islands, Palau, I think is included with COFA. So basically, they have relationship with the United States because the United States is using their islands as part of the military, and also historically World War II, right? And then where did the United States basically for the nuclear arms, like those bombs are basically then tested, let's say in Marshall Islands, the Bikini Islands. So therefore, it's almost like what do you call it? It's like payback for like for their land, but now that's why they can,
Reparations in a way.
yeah. So now they can come here to the United States, and basically there's an agreement between United States and Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and I think Palau too, like where folks coming from there who are not U.S. citizen or even green card holders can come to the United States for work because of the fact that there was this relationship during World War II and also afterwards that has then been created under COFA. So yes, so they come to Iowa specifically because of the either I think historically, I think either they come for like some of them had come to for like to be pastors. So they come maybe like go to college here to for religious school, and then they stayed on married locally. And then but some are coming in as workers in the let's say Tyson, right? Meat packing businesses or agriculture. So, and also what is interesting, there were times in, I think in early 2000 where I forgot which meatpacking business that were raided by ICE. So they deported undocumented, then they replaced them with Pacific Islanders because they could come like legally, right? Because they could be documented because of that relationship. So there's a lot of folks coming from Palau who then moved to I forgot the name of the town where it was. Remember Postville? Is it
That's it.
Postville? Yeah.
The
So
Postville raid. There's a great
yes,
documentary about it.
the meatpacking industry. So for me, I think this is also like uh, just even policy wise, like immigration policies, right? It's affecting our relationship with each other and also about work. So how then do we, I remember like organizations near Postville like telling me like, oh, how then do we connect with folks who are coming in who are from Palau? We don't know much about Palau. So therefore, like, how do you work with them? So yes, so that is then the relationship, because I think when we're thinking about like, I think a lot of Americans, they don't understand that foreign policies affect local policies, right? Like how immigration comes in. There are certain things in, let's say, in those small islands that you don't even know the name sometimes, right? How it's affecting us in general. And then, sometimes you will, the communities also in Iowa are like becoming more diverse. So the Pacific,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's Asian population is growing. Pacific Islanders are also a growing population. So you have folks not only from Marshall Islands, but also from Chuuk, Ponampay, Pingalapis, Palawans, right? In addition to, of course, the Hawaiians and the Chamorros. So yeah.
One of my friends back in Kansas oversees a program through the state of Kansas, but it's federally funded, that works with the migrant populations of migrant farm workers. And one time she said to me she was studying Chuukese, and I said, "You what? You doing what?" Having never heard of that language or that group of people, but there was a small population of them in southeast Kansas who were working on strawberry farms.
Yes.
And just so interesting. So I wondered tonight, Mira, when I was trying to get the word out about this conversation, that some people might go, "Ugh, Iowa, we live in Ohio. What does Iowa have to do with us?" And I know from my own research and education that human trafficking is a problem almost everywhere. Uh, we have sexual violence and domestic violence all around the globe. I'm wondering what are current or emerging concerns that you see with your work that can that we can translate, that are generalizable, as much of this work is to a degree. What are the things that are coming that are concerning?
Specifically like connecting like
Connected to your work with Monsoon or your work with the National Training Organization.
um I think if it's concerning about human trafficking, sex trafficking, I think those don't know borders, so they don't really know what, like, is it Iowa or Ohio? It's really then what happened if you start working for an organization that provide those services, what kind of services you can offer, right? What are the things that you can create as to create programs that specifically to serve that community, to serve it in a way where it's also like survivor centered. I think that is important. So for me, I think just knowing that one of the things that specifically like in my head is it's still like not I'm not really sure how this is, well, it's gonna connected. Is this kind of among, especially folks who are doing this work on abolitionists, like specifically on, is it sex work or sex trade? Or is it like, is it choice? Should we legalize? Should we not? I think that has been like this major, sometimes a distraction to what is really needed. I think that's been kind of like in my head a lot. So one thing that what we've seen specifically of a good practice is I remember a young woman basically was referred to us, but she's from Minneapolis, from Minnesota, and someone had said like, you know what, I think she's about to do sex trade. She was about to like enter the sex trade because she cannot pay rent. Since we have that funding from a life story, I was like, you know what? We'll pay her rent for 6 months. I'll help her with deposit. We'll do this, we'll do that. You know what? That's all they needed. It's like for young folks, specifically who are in the verge of doing something that they might not be able to get out or whatever, right? It is important for us then to say, like, what kind of resources that we have that we can just like, without any like, without any like stipulations. You just like, let me pay your security deposit. You got no bed. Let me buy you that bed, right? Let me give you money for utilities. Let me do all this for you. So in order for you to find a job or maybe go back to school. So those things, it's like something that's simple for them, maybe not simple, but for us, like, we have some funding. We have a little bit of money that we can share. So those things I think is we got to be like creative, but then at the same time being generous, not a lot of stipulation, and also finding money that will not require you to do like more a barrier for the one that you will be assisting. So that's, for me, I think we just have to be creative. I think this philosophical conversation about like sex trade, sex work, abolition, legalize it. I think it's really like, how then do we make sure that survivors are assisted, that we have a safe and healthy communities, and that at the same time that you can philosophize, theorize, whatever. But I think it's about the practice is more important. I think action is better while you're theorizing, like, because that young woman still need that help, right? So yeah, so for me, I think it's just really finding different ways that we need to be creative for the solutions, and then we need each other for those solutions, right? It's not like just one organization, but it's really working with other organizations to like create that solution. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. As the executive director of a nonprofit, where do you see your social work skills coming most into play, or which ones are your go-tos?
Oh my God, it's really not my social work skill. It's more like my history background. I love
Yeah.
history. Yes. So for me, it's like being curious about people. I don't, like, I'm just like, I'm interested. So it's about the listening, being curious about that person in front of you. It shouldn't always be about you, but it's all like, who are you? What is your story, right? Share me the story. Let's talk about your story. I think for me, that's really what a good social worker is all about. Like, let's talk story. Let's share like, what is your story, being curious and being able to create that space where people are feeling like, I feel safe with this person. They're interested in me. They want to talk, they want to they're asking all these questions, not in a way where because your intake process needs it, but because maybe because you're interested of who they are, where they came from, what is their story, what are the good things besides the challenges that they might be facing. So yeah, just being curious.
My own students know that I am endlessly curious, maybe to their annoyance at sometimes, but I am just absolutely fascinated with human nature and the relationships that we can develop. And it sounds like your work is very person-centered.
I yes, and community centered. I think I'm more community centered because I always think about like okay, so if I'm gonna make this much of money, I want all the staff to also make good money, right? So it's also kind of like if I have something that is nice, I also want everybody to have that nice thing. So it's not just, so it's really about community for me. I think that is what driving me, what driving this organization, what driving staff here. Like we're very community based.
Mm.
It's hard, but yeah,
I always tend to think of myself more as what I would call a collectivist versus an individualist.
that's right. Yes.
Is that something you grew up with? Where did, do you know,
Yes.
where
Being
did this come from
Filipino,
for you?
oh yeah, being Filipino, I have to be that. Although, like, I wanted to be individualist, right? I want to have my own room instead of sharing it with a bunch of cousins, right? So it's both. I think there's a way that I think we could balance that because there are certain things that sometimes that being collectivist or sometimes like really putting the community, sometimes that could be hurtful because that community sometimes are the one that's like had um had oppressed certain individuals in the community. There are certain practices within the community that's also oppressive. So I think balancing both and just really finding those liberatory practices that's within that community or within that collective, I think is way better. So always like um critically like just looking at every practices that we have or traditions that we have is crucial. For example, in the Philippines, we have this concept of utang na loob, meaning like like this almost like this obligation because someone did something for you, or so it's like very for me, it makes sense. But then at the same time, that utang na loob perspective can also be oppressive because then certain folks would stay in their marriages because they feel obligated. So this is like this obligation because someone did something for you or you feel obligated. So in the Philippines specifically, there's corruption, political corruption because of that utang na loob. Like maybe this politician gave you something and now it's you're like obligated to like vote for them, maybe, but they're the most corrupt. So there are certain things that I think we specifically need to kind of like critically look at and don't just accept it. Yeah.
Um, Thank you. I want to encourage our viewers to drop questions in the Q&A. I forgot to mention that earlier in case there's something that you want to know about Mira's work or her journey to get to where she is at this point, which to me is just absolutely fascinating. I wonder, Mira, what advice would you give to a new social worker who wants to be more involved in advocacy work or who cares about a specific population or social problem?
Oh, always ask the community that you will be working with, what do they need? Like it's basically like don't just assume. I think that's one thing. It's like you cannot save everyone. Don't be the savior mentality. In addition to that, I think just listening. There's this, I remember being in this community a roundtable discussion in Seattle, and it was all I think people of color and also Native communities. And one uh, Lao advocate had basically said in the Lao community, there is this saying that you have to listen to the grass before you run. So I think it's the same way, like being, if you're going to do community work, you got to really listen on what is really on the ground. Just your ear should be on the ground because the solutions are there. You don't have to find it somewhere else. The solutions are there. There's some expertise in there. So therefore, for me, I think it's important that you don't come in as if you know everyone, that you know everything just because you have an MSW or PhD. It's really sometimes the ones who do not have the PhD or have learned their expertise on the ground are sometimes the best, right? So I think listening to that, I think is crucial. And then one most important thing is also thinking about self-care in a way where it's not about self-care for me is beyond like bubble bath or whatever, whatever, right? It's more about like saying no to certain things. Like you don't be afraid to say no. It's okay not to do nothing. Um, there are certain there's like a limitation what you can do because we're humans, right? We cannot be like doing everything because it's also your own sanity, it's your own health. Because what I've noticed is folks who come in, I started having gray hair. I started becoming wider, right? Because of this work, because I wasn't taking care of myself. So it is important then that we, that we also not care for others, but also making sure that you're caring for yourself and your family as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Here is a message from one of our viewers. Just expand things a little bit so I can see it all. Good evening, Mira. Thank you for meeting with us this evening. Provided the mission of your agency and the current administration's policies, what do you suggest we do as social workers to ensure we can continue assisting vulnerable populations? Or maybe what do you hear that they would like for us to know or assist with? Good
Um,
question.
so I'm just gonna so for me, when I think about vulnerable population right now, I think I see, I'm just gonna make an example, is immigrants, right? Especially the ones who are like maybe undocumented. So that's the one is like really how then do we make sure that how then do you work with communities that might be afraid to ask for help, or communities that are even afraid to, let's say in Iowa, they're no longer, I think they're going to stop the Latino festival or some festival in Cedar near Iowa City because they're afraid of ICE coming in, right? So just kind of knowing those things of how then do we ensure that communities are safe. I think we have to look at vulnerable communities in a way where we continue to work with them, even though that maybe some fundings might be gone because you're serving certain communities. And then also like there's some erasure of certain communities, especially for the LGBTQ community. There's like going to be erasure of like trans folks, right? How then do we continue that work? Because administratively that's like something that's being erased, like research or whatever, funding even. So it's important that we think about different ways in how to serve certain communities that are being targeted. So those are the suggestions that I'm kind of thinking about because we're in the, at this moment, right? It's like how then do we continue to work, but also yeah, how do we continue this work safely? Because there's just so many things that are going on. But I think for us anyway here is like we want to make sure that we continue to work, we continue to serve different communities that come to our door. It doesn't matter which communities they are coming from.
Yeah. And I think we're going to need to be very creative
Oh
in
my
how
God,
that
yeah,
can happen. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Mira, I had asked you before this evening's gathering if you could recommend some resources or your favorite resource that you would like to share with our viewers.
I have a lot of books. And I don't know if some of you will start a book and then you're in the middle, then you'll start another book, and then you'll start another book. And then you have this pile of books with like, like maybe a pen that says like, hey, you stop there. But there are things that I recommend right now. I think I just remembered How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. I think this is just really, I'm going to email it to you because I think this is something that it's not like a perfect book, but it's really a book where it's telling us to slow down, right? Slowing it down, not too fast, really being mindful of what we do. So especially now that we have social media, we have the internet where everything's fast, right? Everything, information is fast. You can get information faster, but then how do we slow it down? So I really like that book. That's one thing that but you know what though? I sometimes do not right now at this moment. I also did this the very first Trump administration is where I also started reading dystopian science fiction because I just do not want to read about like any type of like social theory. Like I just did not want to like look at that, right? I started reading dystopian science fiction. I think that's also like I love Ursula Le Guin. I love N.K. Jemisin. Oh my god, and I forgot her name. Oh my god, she's kind of famous. What is her name?
Octavia
Uh,
Butler.
yes, I love Octavia Butler. I mean, I could read her stuff. I like for me, I think sometimes we don't have to have a resource. Sometimes those science fiction could be your resource because those are creative ones, right? Especially science fiction. Dystopian too, right? So
Absolutely. Well, and I keep Octavia's Brood right next to my bedside, which is
see,
short stories written in her honor. And that has been helpful for me because sometimes that's all the attention I have.
you know what? Another book that was recommended to me, especially if we're thinking about community organizing, is this called Unrig the Game, What Women of Color Can Teach Everyone About Winning. So that was highly recommended by friends of mine. I was like, you got to read this book. So I kind of just started it, but I haven't really. Again, I'm one of those like start, then move on to the next one, start moving to the next one. But I could create a list, definitely. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. I would love to be able to post your recommendations along with this video on the YouTube channel for the Mandel School.
Okay.
Thank you. One
Thank you.
last question before we let you go this evening. What is your greatest achievement?
My daughter. Yes, that, like as long as she's safe and, happy for whatever that she will be doing, I think, yeah, I'm just proud of her. That's,
Yeah,
it's not about the
fantastic.
organization, but it's really about my child. Yeah, my baby. Yeah.
I get that.
Hmm.
Mira, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
This has been enlightening. I have so many questions about the war on human trafficking and if we're winning or not. So many questions about feminist scholarship, and alas, they're just going to have to wait till next time we can get together.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Scott is going to share a QR code that people can scan. We do appreciate any thoughts about this program and any ideas that you have for future programming topics. This helps our school with the Council on Social Work accreditation reaffirmation and helps us provide the types of programs that our folks want to watch and be a part of. So please just scan that QR code there in the middle and it'll take you to a very brief survey. Don't worry if you're not part of the Mandel School or Case Western Reserve University. Your thoughts are still welcome and valued. Mira, I bet you're going to have a busy summer.
Kinda, but thank you.
Well, I hope it is fantastic. Again, I thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the first state I ever lived of outside of my home state, which is
Mhm.
still very dear to me. I miss my folks in Iowa, and I know you're just doing incredible work there to support so many people.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye bye.